Hello, everybody. Merry meet. My name is Zoe Howe, and welcome to my crazy art room where I make my crazy art. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, kicking off the second day of LlewellynCon at this glorious time of the full strawberry moon in Sagittarius. I hope you're all basking in the moonbeams, whether you can see her or not, or if nothing else, just basking in the magical blue light from your computer screens. Now, I know Llewellyn readers are a hugely knowledgeable bunch, so many of the themes that I'm going to be talking about today will not be unfamiliar to many of you, getting down to sort of brass tacks with magical thought, synchronicities, intuition, creativity. But sometimes it's good to be reminded of certain things or to hear a different approach to a familiar subject. So I hope you enjoy what I'm going to share with you today. So Witchful Thinking is the name of my book. I happen to have a copy here. Yes, it's a pun. It is full of humour, but it does have a serious message at its heart. And it encourages people to connect with their inner wisdom and create what I like to call a charmed life. So what does that mean? To me, that means living our best life with the help of magical thinking. And even if you don't identify as a witch or an occultist or a magical practitioner of any kind, I think we can all acknowledge that a shift in our thinking can instigate a shift in the direction of our lives. Everything starts with a thought, and our thoughts, our words, and our deeds are all charged with energy. And this is why we have to be, if you forgive the pun, mindful of them, because, for our own sakes and others. In my opinion, I think you may agree as well, we are also casting spells all the time, whether we're aware of it or not, because everything we do and say matters and affects something or someone else. We don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in isolation. And whatever our beliefs, we all have power that we often take for granted, often because I think we've been led to believe over time that we don't have any power at all. On the subject of inadvertent spellcraft, an example I want to share with you. I recently saw on the TV news here in the UK some politicians, I think they were from the Liberal Democrat Party, very much anti Boris Johnson, as am I. Boris Johnson, of course, our Prime Minister. Now, they were not magical practitioners, as far as I know, but they were doing a photo shoot where they had a blown up balloon where they'd written Boris Johnson's name on it, and then they popped the balloon for the photo shoot. And as soon as I saw it, I said, that's a spell, that they are working magic there. Unfortunately, the spell didn't work, or at least it hasn't yet, but they may be playing the long game. But the point is, we all are working with symbols and symbolism all the time. And symbolism is the language of magic. And witchful thinking, or the magical mindset, is about recognizing that and being more conscious of how we and others use those elements all the time, often in light-hearted and fun ways. And so what better time to talk about that than at a full moon in playful Sagittarius. As magic infiltrates mainstream life via platforms such as TikTok and Instagram, something many people have noticed, and in some cases I think probably feel a bit intimidated by, is that much of this magic-related content relies on the need for stuff, so equipment of every stripe and description and colour and price. And being bamboozled with a list of so-called essentials can make many a new seeker or baby witch feel overwhelmed, or worse, that they're unable to be a magical practitioner if they don't invest in items that maybe they can't really afford or can't access for whatever reason, or maybe just don't even really relate to or understand or particularly connect with. So the good news is the most important magical tools, I'm sure many of you already know, is something we already have. We just need to spend time honing it. The oils, crystals and candles, I love them all, but putting those aside, if you haven't mastered magical thinking before you attempt magical doing, it doesn't really matter what you have in your arsenal in terms of paraphernalia. And even if you're lucky enough to have store cupboards to rival Hogwarts, you won't necessarily have the exact items you need at your fingertips at the exact time, you feel the urge to work a little magic, you might be away, for example. But the other thing is that things, while useful, of course, are not going to do all the work for us. Our minds, our energy, our determined thoughts, that's what we need to create transformation wherever we are and at any time. So physical items, great, use them to direct your energy. Don't expect much to happen in my opinion, you can't expect much to happen if you haven't taken the time to go within and develop your focus, your magical mindset, if you like. And we're going to talk about how to do that. So one thing that's really important, we hear it a lot, keeping our vibration high. That's a really key way to keep our awareness and intention clear, present, and purposeful. And this will have a direct effect on everyday life, but it will certainly have a direct effect on any magical work we do, whether it's writing in our journal, to performing a formal ritual, to making a cup of tea, with mindful intention, stirring a blessing into the cup. So much better than a lump of sugar. But meditation is often cited as a really good way to raise the vibration. But if you struggle with meditating and mindfulness, or maybe there are certain times when you're just too agitated to sit down and relax sufficiently to do so, and we've certainly all been there, there are always other ways to reach that state where you are entirely in the moment. And that's, as we know, that's where our power lies. So I'll be talking a bit more about different ways of accessing that state a bit later on. At the heart of my new book, Witchful Thinking, is an onus on developing the magical mindset. So in my opinion, we'd all do well to be thinking magically in all we do, not just because it's like a muscle that needs to be trained. And so when we do come to work magic, we can rely on it, but because frankly, it just makes everyday life better. So witchful thinking is not just for when you want to cast a spell or mark an esbat. It's also not just for witches. It's for every day of our magical lives. And my favorite ways to hone this mindset is by consciously utilizing creativity and also communication. So communicating, conversing with everything, with yourself, everything has energy, everything has spirit, and we can work with that. Is we can connect with it. And that is a really key part, I think, of building the magical mindset. It's for me, it's the bottom line, really. And when we allow ourselves to consider that everything has a soul, has energy, it's very much an animist belief. We're all part of this network that connects us with everything. Then we can work with that. And this is relevant, whatever shape or form our magical practice takes. Otherwise, I feel like we can end up being like someone who, say, goes to church once a week, but then doesn't really think about divinity or act in a particularly quote unquote Christian way for the other 6 days of the week. We want our spirituality, we want our magic to be authentic. And to me, that means living it and weaving it into everything every day. So it's automatic, it's intrinsic. Magic is our true nature after all. I've always very much believed that. So a big part of that way of thinking is, the good old law of karma, whether you call it the rule of three, whether you call it karma, or just good old fashioned what goes around comes around. Keeping that in mind every day is a great way to start when it comes to developing a magical mindset. It keeps us accountable in our behaviors, our actions, our words, and our thoughts. We always hear it, but everything is vibration. Everything affects everything else. And again, it goes back to that feeling of being part of something far, far greater than us as individuals, something that reverberates and extends across space and indeed time. So considering this wider network idea, and not just in terms of the World Wide Web, it can help us think beyond ourselves, help us live in a less self-centered, solipsistic way, and remind us that we are not actually the center of the universe, even though it might feel that way sometimes. It helps us live in greater balance. And that doesn't mean losing ourselves to a greater whole, becoming this kind of invisible tiny person within this huge kind of macrocosm. I think it can often mean finding ourselves, actually, and understanding that everything we do does have an effect. It doesn't just get lost in the ether. And again, that's a theme that does seem to crop up across cultures and religions in different paths. That moving beyond separation is really key to evolving and ascending and ensuring that we are using and sharing our gifts and our light in the most beneficial ways possible for the good of all. Now, I say for the good of all because that's how I like to work, and I know many others do too. I also acknowledge that is a personal choice. It's not a law. Not everyone chooses to work that way. And indeed, many of us, if you're more experienced magical practitioners, sometimes we do have to tweak what we might see as our golden rules that we like to sort of try and stick to. It all depends on need and circumstance. But again, it comes back to that sense of accountability, that awareness of consequence and what we send out coming back to us, often in unexpected ways, often from unexpected sources. So when we remain aware of that, then we proceed accordingly, and we can't complain about what comes back to us, because everything returns, everything reflects. And just from a basic law of attraction point of view, the way our life looks right now is a direct reflection of our habitual thoughts, words, and actions over time. We're reminded all the time, but if we want to change our situation, we need to change how we think, speak, act, and treat others. We need to honestly, compassionately inspect our intentions and make sure we're happy with them. Make sure we don't have an underlying agenda that is actually scuppering us, or check whether we actually, what we actually want in our heart of hearts is, still what we want. It might have changed. That to me is another important part of witchful thinking, or the magical mindset, giving ourselves space to change, checking in with ourselves, allowing ourselves to evolve. Yes, we want to be committed and serious, in our practice, but we also have to question, check in with ourselves, and not blindly follow something that maybe we no longer really relate to. Maybe we've moved forward, we're shifting, we're changing beings. And I think we need to give ourselves the space to be so. I know that other people sometimes like to put us in little boxes, but we don't have to do that. So I mentioned communication earlier in terms of being a really great way of helping to hone the magical mindset and really work with it and develop it. And the idea of conversing and conversation, great theme for a Wednesday, Mercury day. I'm not going to mention Mercury retrograde. I just sort of did. But the idea of conversation for me and communication, that's a big one. I know many of us have conversations with nature and often feel a kind of telepathic communication with trees and plants, and certainly animals. I recently had an interesting situation where I was really honoured to be able to kind of help out a bit. It concerned a friend of mine, a wildlife ranger called RJ Tagala. And those of you in the UK who are aware of BBC Springwatch, he's part of the team behind Springwatch. He's a really interesting person and a lovely soul. And he actually has his own book out now called The Unique Life of a Ranger. And so he has a very interesting life. And he got in touch. He was having some problems with a wayward rooster. He kind of mentioned it to me in sort of humour at first. He didn't realise I was going to come back with lots of suggestions, but I do love a challenge, even if it's a challenging rooster. So he was having some issues with this rooster who kept attacking him every time he approached to feed him and the rest of the chickens. And he was advised by, experts to say, assert his own dominance when approaching the chickens and the rooster, assert his dominance in various ways. But my feeling, I had a sort of real instinct that might actually be doing more harm than good. And I said, I just suggested, go and talk to him, go and talk to this rooster, kneel down, get closer to his level, and just kind of have a chat with this rooster. Tell him you're not a threat. You're actually his friend. You're not interested in jockeying for position. You just want to come by in a peaceful way, give them some food, make sure they're comfortable, and then leave. You're on his side. You're there to help. You're a pal, And so RJ had to think about this, put this in his own words beautifully and very sincerely. He did this with great commitment. And sure enough, I was thrilled to hear that it was actually the first time this rooster didn't attack him. And I believe they've been cautiously friendly with each other ever since. And I just thought it was really interesting. I loved that he took it on board. And I just thought the mundane mindset might not have even considered something like that, or would have rejected the idea as ridiculous and, wouldn't have even tried. But the magical mindset says, you know what? We don't know everything, let's just give it a try and see what happens. And I'm sure we can think of all sorts of areas of our lives where we can do things like this. The fact is that the rooster might not have understood the words he was hearing, but he understood the energy of the words and RJ's intention. And that's what made all the difference. So we should consider this also when we speak to babies or animals, thinking that they don't understand the words we're saying. It doesn't matter. The words are charged with energy, they're charged with meaning, and they shape things for better or worse. And one of the things that puts me in mind of, and I talk about a little bit in the book, many of you will be aware of the experiments of the scientists Masaru Emoto, who he did an experiment where he wrote different words on labels and attached them to bottles of water, which he would then place in the deep freeze. And so some of these bottles had beautiful, kind words and messages on, others had insults and cruel words. And when he took these bottles out of the deep freeze, the ice crystals from the bottles with cruel words presented as warped and distorted under his microscope. They were kind of ugly and disturbing looking, while those of the bottles labelled with kind words formed these entrancing, beautiful patterns. And so when we consider that, and we consider that we ourselves are mostly water, this alone should make us a lot more mindful of how we converse with ourselves and also others. And on the subject of conversation, I like to talk to objects as well, much to other people's amusement and concern. Again, this reflects my view that everything, me, the object, we're all made up of energy, the same stuff, so we can work with that. And for example, if I can't find something, rather than turn the place upside down, my magical mindset will guide me towards just literally asking it to present itself. And I generally find it does, or rather my gaze finds it. Give it a try. We can all do this. It's quite fun. It's a fun way of honing our intuition. I say thank you to my computer after a long day's writing. I ask my garden what herb I might need for a certain ailment. And indeed, if the herb is happy to be snipped, and I always say thank you. I'm sure you do too. And I ask inanimate objects to kind of help me out if they're not doing what I think they're supposed to do. So, respectfully, of course, but, even as a kid, I found I could sort of boost battery life that way, or fix an electric window I'd broken as a kid. And I'm not a technician, but I know how to make a sincere and heartfelt request and connect with energy and recognize that I am energy, everything's energy, and energy can shift and merge and respond. I essentially treat everything as if it has a soul. And this is something I heard from a Jewish friend of mine many years ago. Her rabbi had told her this, and it really spoke to her, and as it did to me, and I've sort of held it in my heart ever since. And it very much led to me living a life that was much kinder and gentler. You'll never find me slamming a door or smashing a cup in anger. It's a way of life that's respectful and interconnected, a way of life that is about the opposite of separation. It's about connection, and it is loving, and it works for me, and it's very much part of what I would call my magical mindset. Now, a big part of developing the mindset is also trusting our instincts. Now, we're told this a lot, and I realize this can be problematic and confusing and sometimes distressing. We're often told, trust your instincts, or your first instinct is always the right one. But it can be confusing to know the difference between a real instinct and an irrational fear, something that comes maybe from conditioning or anxiety or a trauma response. Our minds, as we know, can often present us with things that just aren't real, sometimes because of insecurity, sometimes because of abuse, sometimes because of ancestral patterns, or, our mind is trying to protect us from threats that maybe aren't relevant anymore. So how do we strengthen those instincts so we can actually start to tell them apart from unhelpful thoughts? And one way I like to do this is by playing games. As I said earlier, witchful thinking is a playful path, but it's also powerful. And one of my favorite ways to do this is, if I'm in a busy supermarket, this is a good way of testing your instincts and trusting them a bit and giving them that trust, and then they kind of amplify. So like if I'm in a really big supermarket and I'm there with my husband, we've got separated somehow, and I think, oh gosh, where is he? Rather than think, right, I'm going to go and look for him, which will take me ages, or get my phone out and say, where are you? Which aisle are you in? I will just say to myself, or my feet, just take me to him. And invariably it works. And it's kind of always quite amusing to me that it does. And it's just kind of giving yourself that chance to just give it a try and trust. It's kind of easy. It's humorous. It's a nice way to develop these kinds of, spiritual muscles, if you like. No pressure, and we can trust that things will improve the more we do them. It's not arduous. I think when we make things arduous, we rebel and we give up. And so you can use methods like drawing different symbols on pieces of paper, turning them upside down, intuiting which one is which. Again, have fun with this. Don't be hard on yourself if you don't get it right straight away. Just invite yourself to get better and see what happens. And this goes beyond just a fun game. This is something that will help you in everyday life. You'll find these instincts which are getting sharper, popping up when we meet someone new, or when we're in conversation, when we're making a decision. We'll get better at recognizing what an instinct is, and then we can act accordingly. I remember talking to Patty Negri on her Witching Hour podcast about this, the supermarket game. And she said, "Oh, wow!" She said, "I can't wait to lose someone in the supermarket." But it's fun, and even if you're there on your own, if you're looking for something specific, rather than just sort of search around the different aisles, just think, take me to them, feet, do your stuff, and see what happens. We all have this gift, and I truly believe that these are all abilities that are intrinsic to us. And wishful thinking is just about finding our way back to those things that are very natural to us all. And I think when you play these games to work on your instincts, also notice what you feel like when you do feel that urge to say, oh, it's this one or it's this way. Do you get a twinge in your gut? Does your heart space feel different? Does something change in your breathing maybe, or do you get a tingle in your scalp? Pay attention to these little tells, because the more we do, the more they strengthen and amplify. We encourage them. And again, we've heard this before, but, the energy grows where our attention goes. And this can be used, for good or for ill, but it's just a truth that's really useful to remember every day. And we can just utilize it for the betterment of everyday life. Sometimes our instincts work in very subtle ways that we almost don't notice at all. I'm getting better at respecting this. I'm certain this must happen to all of us, but I've realized that, say, if I'm leaving the house and I find myself just, briefly noticing something, I usually find later on that I actually needed that thing. And the fact that my gaze fell upon it at that moment was actually an instinct saying, take that umbrella. It wasn't just a random thing, but it was so subtle that it can just be confused as something meaningless and random. So whenever I find this happening, I respect it. I take the thing with me, obviously if it's not a massive thing like a chest of drawers, generally I always find that I do need that thing later in the day. So it's kind of a fun, interesting way of working with our intuition and building and honing it. And, it's just a lovely thing to remember that we all have this gift within us that has our backs if we only listen. I think the great thing about the witching life is that we aren't constantly looking outside of ourselves for help or for guidance. We are working with the universe, with our deities, perhaps planets or celestial beings, nature. Many of us do look to other forces for guidance, but we must always remember that we have our own guidance system as well, that sometimes it just needs sort of shaking awake and giving a few proverbial cups of coffee to bring it up to speed and work with it. I think, we all know this, but patriarchal religions and societies, they've made us, very successfully made many of us forget that we have this within ourselves and we have access to what we need if we trust it. We are finding our way back to that, and we're helping each other do so as well, which is just really beautiful. It can be a slow but sure way to start hearing it, but we also mustn't be impatient if that inner bell is faint at first. It's been drowned out by so many other noises over time that it can, take us a bit of time to get it to sort of go ding a little bit louder. But just make it a game, as I say, include it in your daily life and see what happens. Same goes for acknowledging synchronicities rather than just sort of brushing them off as meaningless coincidences. Consider what they mean. It's similar with sensing spirit, I think. For me, I feel spirit is around all the time, whether we notice or not. And again, it's not only a case of, holding a seance and there it is. We're accompanied far more often than we think, I believe. And learning to notice the way we feel, if we suddenly feel a tingling sensation or a slight warmth or coolness that can't be explained, or, perceive lights, maybe colours or sounds, perhaps a wave of emotion. These can all be tells that we brush off or ignore, but they may be evidence of company or another energy or a shift in energy. So noticing how we feel from moment to moment can be very revealing. Creative work is often a kind of meditation. That's another way where we can kind of tune in, I think, raise the vibration and clear our mind of the kind of fog of everyday life. Creative work is certainly magical, I believe. The process of creation can make time seem to stand still, whether we're painting a picture or just jotting down our thoughts, writing a song. Once there was nothing, now there is something on that page. That's manifestation instantly. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be complex, no one else has to see it. But I think when we move to bring something into being and we trust ourselves to do so from the heart and give ourselves that space to do so, I think that's really what matters. Because magic, the magical life, it lies beyond self-consciousness. It lies beyond perfectionism and imposter syndrome, which I know so many of us, we second guess ourselves. but it lives and can be accessed in this flow state. And creativity and art, of any kind, it can be a direct route to that state. Even if you feel like, oh, well, I'm not artistic, it doesn't matter. We are all creative in different ways. Might be creative in the way you cook a meal, or do, or garden, or choose your outfit and do your makeup. There's so many ways where we express ourselves. And I think that's an interesting thing to tap into, definitely. Or just writing in our gratitude journal. Writing is another magical act, in my opinion. As many a witch will tell you, there's a reason why we call it spelling. And so whether you're writing a diary or a poem, as I say, writing in your gratitude journal, getting those thoughts out of your head and onto the page can create a much needed shift and a sense of clarity and freedom. Or if we're writing our moon, new moon or full moon list, and then say, burning it, releasing it, these are very simple acts, but they're powerful. And I think if you relax and write freely in a meditative state, you can often find yourself channeling messages from either spirit or your own unconscious. And these things can often deliver answers that we're looking for. I like to use automatic writing or automatic drawing, and often symbols and words come through that are really quite fascinating. Playing music is another way I love to raise my vibration, to clear my head, conjure something new. Whether you're playing an instrument yourself or actually just putting on the music of others. One of my favorite mantras has always been that music is magic and songs are spells. And I've talked about this a lot over the years, but I really believe it. I believe it to be true. Songs have a transformative effect for the songwriter and for the listener. Music has the power to uplift us or depress us, to take us back in time, to evoke memories, to even create physical change with the use of sound frequencies. And I like to use music in rituals to clear a space, to seal work. And I'm not just talking about sort of ambient new age tracks. I'm also talking about Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Stevie Nicks. So he's obviously a magical being. So those are all really kind of simple, accessible, important ways of shifting our vibrations, I think, and tapping into creativity and the flow state. You could even, if you think, well, I love art, but I don't know where to start, you could just start with making a Pinterest page and picking images that have intense colors that can, uplift us or calm us. Color is extremely powerful as a healing medium. There are so many ways you can go with this. Very simple. They're the things that are around us all the time. But when you think about them in a magical way, things get quite exciting and interesting. Live music as well. I know that the global pandemic really put the brakes on that experience, but another form of magic is really sensed at a live show. I'm sure many of us have experienced that. It's possible to come away from a concert feeling brand new, charged up, positively changed, and a lot of that is to do with the collective experience. Another magical effect of live music is how an audience responds to the artist, often as one person. That transcendent experience creates an egregore, or the group mind. It's a concept more associated with occult settings, than a sweaty stadium show, but it's significant. It's very real. So these are just a kind of few ways that you can enter the flow state and encourage your own magical mindset. I truly believe that life can shift to an enchanting and powerful new level when you give yourself the time to just open your mind to the possibilities of creativity, communication, and your own guidance system. And so for now, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Thank you all so much for being here with me and for listening, and full moon blessings to you all. Enjoy the rest of LlewellynCon.